and we have responded. Mr. President, as I stand to give again my full support to the revenue and expenditure for the year 2022, to the cries of the nation, our elderly, our vulnerable, our children in the face of this raging pandemic, the budget that has been presented was informed based on the challenges, based on the expectations of our people. Because when you vote a government into office, they are voted there to take care of the needs of the people. And despite what the challenges are, we cannot put our hands up in the air as parents and as guardians. You cannot put your hand up in the air and say, what can I do? But you have to find a way. And this is what we have done. Mr. President, I am satisfied that the response has met the demands of the times, and while we are far from where we were 2 years ago in 2019, and far from where we hope to be 2 years from now, we are making a difference, and the successes are evident. Those successes do not often scream loudly, but they are heard in the villages and in the street corners because they touch the lives of people, and that's what matters most. The achievements of this government and our thrust to help improve the circumstances of our people are felt in the homes that have now become technologically equipped. And you want to say equipped schoolhouses for our nation's children. The achievements are echoed in the halls of our hospitals and clinics that have not calved under the pressure of this unruly virus, even in our darkest hours. Our gains are mirrored in the smiling faces of workers that can still earn a livelihood for their families in small businesses that have weathered the storms or the crisis because of government's incentives. Yes, Mr. President. In a period characterized by decreased revenue, a declining economy, and rising frustration emanating from lockdowns and curfews, the gains do not always loudly announce themselves, but we feel them in the changing social climate of our nation. We feel them in the anticipation this week of thousands of workers who will tangibly feel the collective gratitude of the government and people for keeping this nation safe, and others for keeping this nation going productively in those pandemic times. And yes, Mr. President, for those who were in the front line and have worked tirelessly and put themselves at risk and their family at risk, they deserve the bonus, as they call it, that is coming to them this week. And for this, we must be eternally grateful. And what would have caused us to be in this position? It was because of forward thinking many, many moons ago. The programs that would have been initiated by this government. I will come to this later. But we are at a better place than we were in 2020. And all because of forward planning and thinking. As a government, we are committed to the development of this entire nation, and we are demonstrating that in our policies, our actions, and our engagements. Mr. President, while the different sectors of this nation may not agree on all issues, we must agree that this administration has not slept on the job. And our priority has been and continues to be the well-being of the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. We have kept this nation safe. And we will not boast, because the people put us there to do this, and they expect this from us, because we have a good track record. So if we have done anything otherwise, they would have been disappointed. And we have managed to eke out policies that have kept this economy afloat. And we are sowing those seeds back into the lives of our people. Back into the lives of our people. Many years from now, we will recall this period for many reasons. We will recall how hope and resilience triumph over adversity. How the global village, bolstered by vaccination, triumphed over this virus. And how good governments took care of the people. And as a government, we will continue to steer the ship, because the pandemic is not yet over. And you need a government that is responsive, a government that is experienced, a government that has the know-how and the fortitude to fight in the trenches for its people and to ensure that no one is left behind. And that's our commitment to the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. Mr. President, I have a long list, so I will try to run through as quickly as possible. Today, I will endeavor to capture a few areas that I have responsibility for. But before I do so, I just want to clear up a little bit of misconception that was propagated earlier on in this honorable house. My good friend on the other side, one who represents Labour. And while we have a very good relationship, I want to say, because we see eye to eye on a number of issues, sometimes we don't see eye to eye on other issues. But I think I understand him and he understands me, that we are here to provide service to the people that we serve. And every worker in this country is our responsibility, not the Labour Senator's responsibility. But we collectively, government and people, we have a responsibility. So every benefit the workers receive in this country, we too benefit. And that should be the ultimate goal. But what I do not appreciate is when we are not honorable with our discourse and dispensing of information. I cannot tolerate such. Yes, we will fight and we will probably butt heads because we want the best for our constituents. But let's ensure that we do this honorably. I still contend there was no need for this demonstration in the street for the 4% increase. This was a done deal. It was signed to, and there was full agreement that it will be paid. As a matter of fact, it was paid in 2020 during I won't say the height, but the initial outlay of COVID. And while government, we had to lock down this country, and I mean, your revenue uptake was 50% of what it should have been. And it was way less than what was in 2019 when this agreement was signed to. The government paid for the whole year. And instead, it is worse now, so we asked for a deferral. A deferral. But we commit to doing this and said, okay, later on in the year, because we start seeing a turnaround at the middle of 2021, things started to move in the right direction. So later in the year, there was still no need for this sort of mass demonstrations and so forth. You see, because this government has a track record, and I want the present leaders in the labor movement to just go back and do the history. You see, in 1995, Mr. President, this NMP administration came in and decided that they were going to do, or what do you say, a pay and grade rearrangement within the public service. What was this designed to do? Was to ensure that they realign occupation with salary. And in some sense, it was informed based on, when you look at, let's take, for example, teachers in St. Lucia, on same scale, getting much more money than what people in Grenada was getting. And I remember being in the private sector, and based on the job I was doing, I was interfacing with the Ministry of Education in particular. And when the accounts person told me, the government is doing this good thing, they're realigning this so salaries and so on will go up. And they did this just before there was negotiation for salary increase. So you got the realignment through the pay and grade scheme, and then you had the negotiation. So your increase was based on the new salary that you just received. But this government did that. And so when we say to you, we are fully committed to honoring the signed agreement for the 4%, but give us a little time because of COVID. Oh my God, have a heart. This was all it's about. So we make the noise, then the money was paid. So you got from, was it October going forward, or August 31st? I don't remember the exact month. Going forward, but it was the 7 months or 8 months. So it was, I think it was probably August. 8 months would be seen as a back pay from the beginning of January. And that again, we asked. But the arrangement was made with an institution because we were saying, we want to give you this in a 1 year with a 1 year bond, and you can get whatever 3% interest rate or whatever. It's much more than if you were going to put money in the bank. And I was of the opinion, though, one of the credit unions, you have teachers credit union, probably was best to buy this thing because there is a guaranteed increase of 3% on whatever the money is worth. But it was not taken up. Yes, other credit union facilitated the process. But the point here, Mr. President, this government has consistently been the best in terms of remuneration for the workers of this country. Check the records. In 2013, when we came in, the previous government signed increases with back pay and so forth, and said they're going to pay it in the first quarter of the new year. But knowing the election was going to be called in February. So saddle the new administration, because I know they were going out. You couldn't pay salaries, you had to sell assets. You know you were going out. They were paying people on the 34th or the 48th of the month. You know you were going out. So you saddle the incoming administration, and let's look at it. When I tell you it was deliberate to hurt the new administration, the election was called on the 18th of February. Salaries is usually paid around the 25th. You just come from a situation where you couldn't pay salaries, you had to sell assets, and even you sold what you didn't have. Because the Hamilton house was not government's own. So you sold assets to pay salaries, and you gave the new administration 7 days to find over $20 million to pay salaries, thinking that the government will bust on arrival. But we were able to do it. And not a few months, well, not months, weeks later, we had to honor the commitment that you signed to pay the back pay, which was over $40 million. And we found the monies. So I will ask my brothers in the trade union movement to go back and look in history and see which government has stood up and defended the rights of workers of this country. This is the administration, no one else. So it's unfair for you to try to master this administration with those set of tactics. I mean, it's not common sense. Come on. Come on. It's about time we give this administration the due rewards that it deserves. It has consistently stood in the trenches for our workers. And what? Let me move on. There is another issue that was raised as it relates to the WRB. And this again, Mr. President, I don't know how else we want to say it, but you can't be on two sides, you can't speak on both sides of your tongue. It's either you're for or against. This administration has never supported the sale of the Grenlec to WRB. We saw this as counterproductive, and it proved itself as we went along. In 2016, the World Bank, through an ISERA project, decided to assist 4 OECS islands who had very high electricity rates. They said, as a matter of fact, it was counterproductive for national development. The rates were too high. And provided resources to help modernize those ESAs. So Grenada in 2016, through help from the ISERA project, passed the new ESA, the New Electricity Supply Act. Grenlec opposed to it vehemently and contended, WRB, and contended that the new ESA triggered a repurchasing event and decided to take government to court to repurchase the shares that they possess in Grenlec. Government didn't have a choice. Government said, let the ESA run and continue to operate this country, because what is here is enough for you to raise enough revenue to continue to be afloat, but at the same time, release the people. And that's where it went to court. That is the issue. Go back and check it. I was there, I was present, I know. But let's look at what is happening now. So, they went to arbitration, and the arbiters agreed that we have to repurchase Grenlec and the shares from WRB to the tune of around 63 million US dollars. And the contention is, and we have said it here repeatedly in this honorable house, where the finances came from. In 2020, Emmanuel, we were given time when we had to pay it, because if not, the penalties that would be put onto this government, or the country, I should say. COVID, as a result of COVID, there were a lot of capital projects that we couldn't implement. And one of them, I remember, as I said, $5 million was in the budget for the home improvement, bathroom, inside bathroom and toilet for vulnerable people. That could not have been implemented. That's where $5 million came from right away. And there are other savings within the budget that took care of this. We've told you repeatedly, but come today to make it look as if this government is hiding information from the people of this country. The information is there for you to see. It is right there. I could lend you mine. I'll leave on that and move on. Let me move now, Mr. President, to disaster management. The National Disaster Management Agency remains committed to strengthening our national resilience through fostering an enabling environment that promotes a disaster risk reduction culture in this country. In this regard, we will continue to work with our 17 districts, our district disaster teams, to ensure that they are fully engaged to provide the necessary work within the districts to have our people informed and ready to move in the whole concept of disaster risks, or disaster risk culture. In 2021, we had a number of milestones. The strengthening of the legal and institutional framework for comprehensive disaster management. In so doing, we had the support of the World Bank with technical assistance to finalize the draft disaster management bill and the operationalization of the coordination protocol for the declaration of national and subnational disasters. We had the finalization of the procurement of the consultancy to conduct a comprehensive disaster management audit. And this is extremely important because, and we've been working with our various stakeholders to ensure that they are part of this initiative because it will help the country going forward as it relates to our ability to respond to emergencies, but most importantly, to access grant funding that is available to help bolster your system if it is not at the optimal level. We had the draft Grenada National Emergency Telecommunication Plan completed. And we had support from the ITU in this regard. So we're looking forward very soon to have the finalized plan presented to this nation, because the importance of this here, Mr. President, is to ensure that in the event of a national disaster, there is a coordinated and plan that will guide our response. So you could avoid chaos, you could avoid confusion and so forth by having this. We've also been able to access through the NTRC and the USF Fund, a public safety communication digital trunk radio project. At this point in time, the final work has been done to complete the room to house the project at our new EOC facility, Emergency Operations Center at Manjulu. We've also been able to access funded through USAID and the Caribbean Climate Resilient Initiative to implement through the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, a project that provided $150,000 to purchase equipment, and we use this to get communication equipment, laptop and desktop computers that will aid in our response mechanism to disasters, and just over $33,000 to assist in the procurement of PPEs in our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. We also had support from the U.S. Southern Command with the donation of 2 field hospitals, again in response to our COVID-19 pandemic. And also the installation of equipment and furniture at the newly constructed EOCs and warehouses at Manjulu in Grenada and Bel Air in Carriacou. We have experienced some procurement delays as a result of course, the COVID-19. But I'm pleased to inform this Honorable House that we look forward to early in the new year to have those equipment installed in our new facilities, and we look forward to occupying fully those new facilities. We have also, through the EU Fund and Country Direct Fund, implemented through CDEMA, we had 2 district emergency operation centers, namely at Black Bay in St. John's and Riverside in St. Patrick, to be upgraded with, as we call them, generator protective houses in the tune of just about 45,000 euros for those 2 upgrades. We will continue, of course, with the capacity building for our staff and our volunteers, because, as we do know, the agency thrives on the work of volunteers, and capacity building of volunteers is extremely important if we are to be very effective in our response mechanism. We've also been able to access geospatial training, technologies and data for disaster risk management, and this was sponsored by ECLAC. We had online regional basic community emergency response training, as we say, SOT training, and this was sponsored by the OAS and the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA of the United States. Training also in geospatial portal of the Caribbean Risks Information System, and this was spearheaded by CDIMA. So we look forward to 2022 as an agency, and we will continue to strengthen institutional arrangement for comprehensive disaster management and improve capacity for managing emergency response and strengthen and sustain community resilience. In 2022-23, St. George's has been identified as a new area for tsunami ready, and the project will be supported by UNESCO, the IOC, and the CTEC, CDIMA. Funding has been secured from USAID, approximately $40,000 as a main sponsor for this 2-year project, which will see the erection of signs, the production of an inundation map, and to ensure that our people are adequately informed and signage are placed at strategic locations that in the event of a tsunami, our people will know exactly where to go to be safe. And I must say, Mr. President, that work has already started in this regard. The inundation map, which I think is one of the most difficult things to do, has already been completed. And our team of workers at the agency has started the process of consultation to ensure that when this project is rolled out, it's rolled out to meet the needs of the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Martinique. Also, I want to mention, Mr. President, that NADML played a critical role and continues to play a critical role in our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. We work with our partner, the Ministry of Health, to do a number of things. One, we help provide oversight of the St. George's University, SGU Granans campus, which was used and is continuing to be used as our government facility for quarantine, to quarantine people as a result of the virus. We also were responsible for the placement of people into those site quarantines, ensuring that the facility is conducive to house people in a safe and secure environment. We had responsibility to inform the RGPF daily as to discharges as a result of people being moved from quarantine, or if they have to move from one quarantine site to the other. We were responsible for those things. Our still is responsible. We assist the health team at the MBIA, especially when there are heavy flights in the clearing and dispatching of visitors coming to our island. We also coordinate psychosocial support with the Ministry of Social Development for people who have been in quarantine and families who have been as a result of probably being in isolation. And we do understand, and it's been told to us yesterday, yes, of the public health challenge that a lot of people experience as a result of the pandemic, and probably they're still experiencing those challenges. But we continue as an agency to collaborate with our stakeholders to ensure that our people receive the requisite counseling that will help them to deal with this dreaded pandemic. To date, we have had 358 people quarantined or isolated at the government facility at St. George's University in Grand Anse. Currently, there are 95 approved facilities being used across the island, and we are in constant communication with those facilities to ensure that what needs to be done is done. I would like to move now, Mr. President, to public administration and promoting digital transformation of the public service by leveraging technology to work smarter and build resilience across all institutions. Transformation is critical now more than ever in the present circumstances. Amidst the disruption of the ongoing pandemic, the demand for digitalization in the governance and management of the public service has greatly accelerated. In 2021, we had the rollout of the DG4R, the Digital Governance for Resilience project, which is US $15 million, seeking to enable large-scale transformational changes in the area of tax and revenue collection online, payment processing, electronic identity, and digitization of public records. Extremely important, and one will say, well, with the advent of COVID, and where there was restriction in movements and the social distancing and so forth, this project has proven to be timely, extremely timely. We also had the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project, CADI, which is a US $8 million project, is also now effective. The project activities will focus on cybersecurity, digital literacy, and technology adoption. And I must indeed say that the project has already started. So now more than ever, it has become essential that government builds the operational resilience to thrive in this new reality where e-working is becoming most prevalent and relevant. And we do understand, as a result of the pandemic, how this e-governance and e-working has become, if you want to say, the mainstay and the savior in a lot of regards for people to remain safe from the COVID-19 pandemic. Strengthen human resource management for greater operational efficiency and increase employee engagement. In 2021, we had the implementation of the Human Capital Management System. The department concluded its phase 1 implementation of the Cloud Suite of Human Capital Management System, the Global Human Resource Model, on August 26, 2021. The addition of this HR technology provides government with the ability to better manage its workforce. Key focus areas for 2022. Contract employment reforms. A policy will be set to provide clear guidance and establish procedures to ensure that our contract employment practices continue to protect the right of our workers to decent work and fair pay. Work on addressing the pay disparity has already started. Regularization of teachers, acting appointments, temporary appointments, and other anomalous employment situations will be done. The manpower plan for 2022 will normalize the employment status of eligible contract doctors and nurses, teachers, and other officers who are now in temporary positions, and that's a commitment to the workers of this country. And as it is said, when we say it, you could take it to the bank. National security and home affairs. The Royal Grenada Police Force, Mr. President, in 2021 has been contributing to the national effort in the fight against the COVID pandemic. In partnership with other frontline workers, the RGPF did an awesome job in keeping our nation and people safe. I think there should be a table up for the RGPF. And that should be across the board. They have done an outstanding job. And while we were in our beds, I will assume you were in your beds in the night, taking a rest, they were out there doing what was necessary to keep this country safe. And for this, I want to say to the Commissioner and all these men and women, thank you. Thank you very much. Crime prevention. The onslaught of the COVID pandemic did not slow the effectiveness of the RGPF in solving crimes, which as of September 30th, 2021, stood at a whooping 78%. You heard me? 78% crime solving ratio in this country. A percentage, sorry. Notably, we have also seen an 82% contraction in homicide, moving from 17 in 2020 to 3 in 2021, and 2% contraction in reported crimes. Credit must also be given here to the public for their role in this regard. So when our citizens call and report what they've seen, this to aid in our ability to solve crime. But most importantly, it speaks to the kind of relationship that the RGPF has been able to forge with the wider population, and our people are coming forward and are active participants in the protection and safety of this nation. The force seized a relatively large quantity of illegal narcotics, including 40 kilos of cocaine and 2,443 pounds of cannabis, with a cumulative street value of $9.5 million. In addition, a total of 15 illegal firearms, including an AR-15 assault rifle, were confiscated. In most cases, several individuals were arrested and charged, thus contributing to the preservation of peace and security in our communities. Protecting our borders. And Mr. President, there is one outstanding story that we all were proud of. When our Coast Guard, or the men from the RGPF, was able to seize those bank robbers who felt that Carrico was so peaceful and far remote that he could just come through and do anything, but not knowing that we have a network of civilians working along with our police department in this whole collaborative effort to keep our country safe. And they were surprised. They had a shock of their life. And I trust they were roughed up enough that others will say, don't with Carrico. Don't go. We were able also, additionally to 37 illegal immigrants who were intercepted and deported from our shores, most of them involving criminal activities, particularly drug trafficking. We had a few very outstanding achievements in 2021. The completion of the Coast Guard base accommodation, commencement of additional barrack space, and construction of a 100,000-gallon water tank at the SSU, construction of exhibit depository to ensure better safety of exhibits, expansion of the St. David's police station for a fire department, And upon completion, this will be extremely historic for the parish. The purchase of 10 new vehicles for the transport fleet. That again is outstanding. Refurbishment of the dietary and accommodation of other departments at the Carrickle Police Station. So it was development across the board, not just on mainland. We are also in the process of the development of a national maritime security strategy, and we are well on the way in making sure that it is fully developed and be implemented for the protection and safety of the people of Grenada, Carrickle, and Petit Martinique. Her Majesty's Prison. In 2021, Her Majesty's Prison dedicated its effort to strategic review, borrowing, and re-energizing of a new architecture of key support structures, processes, and systems. And let me just pause for a moment here. Because yesterday, Deputy President, a senator on the other side, opposition senator, Sister McQueen, reported that 60% of the inmates at Her Majesty's prisons are there because of sexual offense. And my sister, that was wrong. The information is inaccurate. And what is most frightening is the liberty some takes in providing misleading information to this honorable house. And what is even worse, this information has damning effect on the country itself. We are looking forward to ensure that tourism continues to be a mainstay in the economic revival of this country. When we are reckless and irresponsible with our reporting, it could hurt this country. These are the facts. Crime against property, 39% as of October 31st, 2021. Causing harm, 27%. That's in terms of occupation or occupancy at the prison. Sexual offense, 20%. Drug offense, 10%. And traffic offense, 4%. Out of a population of 348, including 5 women. Let us do our research. So when we provide information to this honorable house, it is unquestionable. When we do this, we hurt our country. Let's stop. Let us stop. And let's take a moment and just think before we say it. Is it the truth? Will it really add value to my country? Anyhow, given the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic, Her Majesty's Prison effectively implemented and executed homegrown COVID-19 provisional measures that to date have negated the potential catastrophic impact of this pandemic within the facility. And they must be commended for an outstanding job to keep the inmates safe. In 2022, the HMP will focus on cost reduction strategy, re-engineering and expanding the rehabilitation program to reduce and recidivism, and critical review and amendments to the legislative framework, the achievement of which will be facilitated by a culture of innovative management practices which will drive the overarching transformation of the organization to become the model of sustainable, anti-corruption, cost-effective, safe and secure correctional institution that redirect offenders to become active guardians and participants of societal norms and values. And now turn to Home Affairs. The strengthening of the legislative framework is at its final stage. Presently, revised legislation for permanent residence and citizenship is being finalized, and same is expected to be submitted for Parliament's approval in the new year. Special projects. Mr. President, despite the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, which gave rise to restriction of movement and partial shutting down of the economy, government in 2021 special project program was able to execute close to 700 small projects, providing temporary employment for a little over 2,100 persons, including some 650 females, in the amount of $6.75 million. While action across the tri-island state, most of the projects were heavily concentrated in communities in the north and east of the island, including Carriacou. So, through all the length and breadth of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique, saw the improvements in the infrastructure for the people. But what is most important here, Mr. President? This special project is government's response to the cry of a citizen asking for support, be it a box drain, be it a road. Yes, it is infrastructure development concrete, but the concrete is in aid of the development of the people in the community where it is undertaken. But as I've said, it's government response because the people asked, and government had to work it all to make it happen. We will continue as a government to listen to the call of our people and to continue to provide retaining walls, lighting up playing fields, as I say, road pavements, drains, and so forth, because the development is development for the people of the country. Needy assistance. To alleviate the financial challenges of unemployment or unemployed low-income families, the Needy Assistance Program supported over 6,700 vulnerable families, including those hit by the effects of the COVID-19. Over 13,700 students received quality education at a cost of over $1.6 million in support. This includes those at the primary and secondary level, with the provisions of basic school uniforms and stationaries, and those at the tertiary institution, both local and overseas, with tuition support. We will continue to give support in 2022 to our nation kids. We also had the introduction of a very wise system in 2021, Mr. President. That's a collaboration with the Ministry of ICT, saw the introduction and successful launch of the We Pay Digital School Uniform Program app that allowed beneficiaries to shop voucher-free, cash-free at the participating vendors' stores, a significant achievement during this year of pandemic. So people with smartphones went with a smartphone and the QR codes, went into the stores, they get the supplies, the QR code is scanned, and the provision of the supplies to the people was given to them. And as I said, in a safe-free environment, no paper, no cash that could have passed on the virus. ICT, online payment portal. The pay.gov.gd payment portal gave members of the public the option of making payments online, thus avoiding the hassle of standing in long lines This was particularly important against the backdrop of the COVID-19 and social distancing and limited physical contact protocols that were legislated. And Mr. President, as a result of this, at the end of September, a total of 53,000 payments were transacted via the payment portal to the tune of $20.7 million. And in 2022, the program will be extended to allow citizens in the diaspora and business entities to conduct more transactions from the comfort of their homes and offices. And I particularly are looking forward to this for the diaspora residents because, you know, sometimes they send them their funds over to be paid in the taxes and so on, and you hear all those horror stories of it not getting where it's supposed to go. The Ministry of Health. COVID-19 continues to test the resilience of the health sector and the economic well-being of our nation. To date, Mr. President, approximately 35% of the eligible population of Grenada has been vaccinated against the COVID-19 virus. And we have seen the death of 200 of our citizens. I think 200 too many. But it's important to note that one of the problems that we face, and I guess so much, not just Grenada, the rest of the world, is vaccine hesitancy. And as a result, we have been able to secure grant funding in the tune of $170,000 US for over the next 12 months to engage in community and stakeholders to communicate the benefits of vaccine and address concerns related to hesitancy. I want to turn to an area because it's right here now I have to deal with. You know, yesterday, the opposition senator, Sister Tessa Sincere, they reported that she was questioning the establishment of a health promotion department within the Ministry of Health and say there wasn't one because she didn't see information there to substantiate that. But she also said that she did her research. And she did her research and was very cocky. I don't know why she went there and said, I know how to do research because I was a doctoral student and I did research. But here are the facts, Mr. President. The Ministry of Health has a health promotion department, and it is located on the first floor of the ministerial complex on the southern side. It is staffed by 5 people, which include a PRO. We never question your ability to do research. What we question is your ability to do good research, because it has been proven before. And throughout this debate, members on this side had to respond and to clear up some misinformation because the research was lacking. But what is even more unfortunate, quite a lot being said about health promotion and the importance, and we have the issues with psychosocial problems, and we need counseling, and we need to promote education and so forth. You see, Mr. President, health care, and what is health care? He said the organized provision of medical care to individuals or community. And also, what is public health? public health is the identification of threats and possibly, if say, contamination that can cause your people to become ill. In this case, we have an issue with the COVID virus. And the COVID virus, as we have seen and remember rightly said, is not a medical emergency. He said, it's a public health emergency. And she was so correct. Because if it's a public health emergency, and public health is to provide information to protect your people from being ill. What we have seen in our response to the COVID virus, the most powerful way to deal with the virus is vaccines. And throughout this presentation, not one time, the people was encouraged to take the vaccine. Why? I got 15 more minutes, right. So if you didn't do it, it means, therefore, there must have been a motive. There must have been. So if we are really true public health officials and specialists, we will not be selective or flippant with the information that can protect our people. So I will say, go and do the research. And the scripture was used yesterday from Proverbs 26, 4 and 5. But I want to use 5. 4 said, I will read it. 4 said, answer not a fool because it was used. Answer not a fool according to his folly, lest thou also be like unto him. And 5 said, answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own conceit. So I choose 5 because I want you to be wise in your own conceit and giving you the truth today. The truth is, don't call people fools when you're not better off. But I move on further to the Ministry of Health because quite a lot is happening within the Ministry of Health. It said, so we're going to work towards ensuring that we deal with vaccine hesitancy, and the Health Promotion Department will be spearheading this initiative in trying to mobilize and to educate our people on the values of the vaccine. Let's look at the notable achievements of the Ministry of Health in 2021. Smart Health Care Facilities Project completed the refurbishment of the Princess Royal Hospital that is in Carriacou. I heard nothing has been done for Carriacou. The Hillsborough Health Center, the Central Medical Stores, and the Richmond Home for the Elderly. Significant smart upgrades included the 20 kVA photovoltaic system and upgraded electrical wiring. And this is wise, forward thinking. But because what we are seeing with climate change and the frequency and intensity of storms, your facility and the electric power could be down. But if you have a photovoltaic system with a whole battery operated system, stored electric power, you will be able to provide proper service to your people under the circumstance of probably losing the electric power. That's the value of the wise thinking. We had training for our nursing assistants in 2021. 2 cohorts were started in 2020. 2 cohorts was completed. And the second one will be completed in 2022. Unfortunately, the midwifery program didn't start, and there was a reason for it. Because the very said nurses who had to be pulled out from the actual practicing of nursing to go into a classroom to do midwifery were needed in our response to COVID. But come this new Here in the first quarter of 2022, the midwifery program will commence. The government would have expended over $1.2 million on the 2 cohorts of nursing assistant program. As part of our public health system strengthening, we had a refurbishment of the Tivoli and Pentonville medical stations to accommodate and to provide quality care to our people. Mind you, as a result of the COVID pandemic, Mr. President, the government had to expend a further $100,000 because of delays as a result of the COVID to ensure that those 2 facilities were refurbished to the optimal standard. We also had upgrade of the HVAC system at the medical stations island-wide, replacement and repair of 30 air-conditioned units to ensure that the storage of medicines as required and to enhance the conditions for patient consultations. And service delivery estimated at a cost of $70,000. We also had the phase 1 of the elevator system, though it was delayed, albeit through COVID, and we had the supply chain issues, we were able to replace the 2 elevators at the General Hospital. We'll continue to improve work in the sector to ensure that we continue to provide top health services to our people. The operating theater and staff lounge at the Princess Alice Hospital was also upgraded. The ministry commenced work on the establishment of a minor surgery theater, staff lounge, and the laundry at the Princess Alice Hospital. The operating theater is expected to support the decentralization and accessibility of services. Mr. President, this is part of the thrust of this government to bring critical services to the outer parishes closer to the homes of the recipients of such medical care. Some 400,000 EC dollars will be spent on the total upgrade. And one that is very close to my heart, the regional award, surveillance for vaccine preventable diseases. The Ministry of Health Community Nursing Division was commended and awarded by the regional body for being the first place division within the region in terms of vaccination against diseases. This is commendable. And in the midst of a pandemic, all community nursing officials went out and ensured that they were able to provide the necessary vaccine against childhood diseases and so forth to keep our population safe. And I want to, the head of the community nursing program is Audrey Lyons. I want you to take a bow for outstanding work. I've seen this lady at work, and I know her passion and her commitment to the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Peter Martinique. The demand for health care services continued unabated during the pandemic, although the spike in the cases mandated the cancellation of some surgeries and temporary suspension of some services. The statistics indicate that essential healthcare services remain accessible to all citizens. Primary healthcare services and community outreach. There were approximately 42,000 visits recorded at the health centers and medical stations for the period June through to October of 2021, and that was in the height of the COVID pandemic. It is expected that by year end, we will reach the 50,000 visits. It's important to note, Mr. President, that the facilities primarily that was accessed was antenatal and child health care services and the elderly, which was 56%. We had 2 parishes that was not as forthcoming to receive those sort of visitation at the health centers, St. John's and St. Mark. But what our committed workers did, they moved out and went into the parishes, and they had some 400 visits to those areas, St. Mark, St. John's, and St. Patrick, result in over 50% of the visits to meet those patients who need the care at their homes. And as I said, in the height of the pandemic, of course, this was a challenging time. But our committed healthcare professionals looked beyond the challenge of COVID and saw the needs of our people and went there and provide the service. They need, of course, so the extra month salary, is a good gesture. Where are you? So, Mr. President, this is important. Hence the reason why I'm saying if we had more, we'd give them more. But to be regularized and to get the 1 month salary is important. But what is very important here and significant, Mr. President? You see, healthcare, as we said, is providing service to our people and our community. And we have seen a group of professional people within our health department providing service to our people despite of COVID. It hurts me when I hear people, some of them not even on island, they're in the diaspora, bad talking your health system and saying that healthcare poor in Grenada. You're costing the very people who are providing the service to our people. Yes, you may, in the first world nations, they may have equipment that might be better than what we have. But I know for sure the commitment that we are seeing from our people is second to none. 5 minutes. And they cannot beat us on that. And I'm happy to say that this is what matters. When you have a sufficiently energized workforce, as we have seen in the health department, that is willing to go all day and provide the service to humanity, it tells you, one, that they are committed, and two, yes, they will probably like a little more salary, but salary is not the main thing. Providing service to humanity, that's what is important to them. Mr. President, let me just try to give due service to the Ministry of Labor. The Ministry of Labor continues to be the vanguard for the protection of the workers of this country. And like the Labor Senator on the other side, commending the Minister of Labor for being there and sticking out and mediating to bring resolution to impasse. It's a collective effort. It's a government effort. And the Labor Minister has been energized to do what he is doing, or what he has done, because the government's intention is to ensure that our workers get the best, and at all times. And as I said earlier in my presentation, when we look back at the track record of this government, it is the only government that has done so much for the workers of this country. So when we say we will pay you at so-and-so date, for it not to happen because something extraordinary like COVID would have come. And as we do know, COVID has been the most disruptive, the most aggressive, and the biggest economy-busting event that we have had in this century. No, nothing else could surpass what it has done. And for your government to stand up and to continue to provide the sort of resources for its staff. And during the pandemic, unlike some of the countries in the region who had to pay their workers with bonds and credit notes, This government consistently, throughout the pandemic, paid its people, and that is commendable, highly commendable. And Mr. President, we are at this place because of the forward-thinking and revolutionary leadership that we possess within this country and within this government. When we made the decision to start the Citizen by Investment program, we've been lambasted, we've been ridiculed, we've been cussed left, right, and center. But today, this program, and through the Transformation Fund, the grant resources that came through it, is helping to keep this economy afloat. And this is wise thinking. Hence the reason why we are at this good place today. And we will continue to be, because the people of this country know what they have. And they will protect what they have. Because they have been there. They have seen others came and others gone. And have not been able to respond in a crisis as this government has responded. And as I said, COVID is not yet over. And as a people, we will not take any chance. We will not take any chance to let go of an experienced team that has proven itself in the midst of crisis. So we had 9/11, and everybody felt that was it. Things bad, and this economy stood up. We had Ivan in 2004 and Emily in 2005, and this economy stood up. You had the economic meltdown 2008, 2009, and the government fell apart. And we came back in 2013 with big recession and humongous debt, and we were able, through forward thinking, to work with our international partners to restore this economy. And because of the work and the sacrifice our workers would have made from 2013 come forward, working with this government, we are at this good place where we can stand and stand proud. And I want to say to the labor movement, I want to say to all the sectors, the agriculture sector, not to beat your chest, because you are part of the whole process of the governance of this country. But stand proud that you have been a part of history in ensuring that you have a government that, one, is responsive to the needs of the people, and a government that's been able to provide services in the midst of COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. President, I want to thank you. I want to thank you, members, for this journey. Blessings.
I want to take a brief adjournment before Senator Dialli takes the floor, and you will wind up today's session. Yes? So could we take, it's now 20 past, so I would wish for us to resume at 4:30. Yes? So honorable members, the House now stands adjourned until 4:30.
I'm Shauna Lambert-Pitt, MD, Fellow of the American Academy of Emergency Medicine, frontline physician based out of Texas. I come from strong Grenadian roots, and my heart is here on the island. I've experienced waves of death during the last COVID pandemic, or the last surge. As I stood at home, I was disheartened by what was going on the island. There were low vaccine rates and people were dying. I come to you to urge you to take the vaccine. There is no treatment available, but the vaccine is a great hope. I know we're hesitant because of all of the myths that are out there. People think that the vaccine has been set up to kill, set up to put the virus in us, set up as a way to track, and all these other reasons. I'm here to tell you, I was one of the first people to take the vaccines at home. People coming in, going into the market and spending money is a way to lift our economy. Okay, there were Black physicians involved in the development of this vaccine. There are lots of Black physicians who have taken the vaccine. It is not a way to get rid of our race. In the last surge with the Delta variant, I noticed that many of the patients who were vaccinated did much better. We do not have a treatment, but we do have a vaccine. It will reduce the rate. It will help us curb this pandemic. If patients are vaccinated, they're less likely to be hospitalized if they contract the disease. This helps our hospital system being not overwhelmed. I urge you with everything to get the vaccine. If you have questions, ask your healthcare professional. We are here to help you make the right decision. Thank you.
The enumeration for National Population and Housing Census will begin from the 10th November 2021. This means residents of the Tri-Island state can expect to see officers of the Central Statistical Office visiting your home and communities to conduct census enumeration. In an effort to ensure the safety of all residents and field workers alike, here is some important information we want you to know. Residents, you have the option of conducting your census interview via telephone. This has been the new main mode adopted in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, our field officers must visit your home to acquire the correct contact information for doing so and other basic information about your household. If you are comfortable with conducting the interview face-to-face with enumerators, you are free to do so as well, but the COVID-19 protocols for face-to-face interviews must be adopted. When a census enumerator approaches your home, he or she should be wearing a mask, face shield, Central Statistical Office branded reflector vest, and the census identification card. The ID card should have displayed the coat of arms, the official census logo, the officer's full name, picture, signature, and the signature of the Director of Statistics. Before an interview with a household, enumerators should ensure their face mask and shield is properly fitted on their face. If an adjustment is needed, this must be done before approaching respondents. Enumerators' hands must be sanitized as well. When approaching the household, enumerators should kindly request the respondents wear a mask. This will keep both the respondents and the interviewers safe in a face-to-face interview. The enumerator must ensure there is at least 6 feet distance between them and the respondent. Physical contact should be avoided. Interviews should be conducted in an open, well-ventilated space. It is preferred that the interview be carried out on the veranda or in a yard. For confidentiality, enumerators must ensure that no one else is in close proximity of the interview. Contact information from the enumerator should be provided to households in case they have any questions, or in the event someone gets sick with COVID-19, it can be traced. If an enumerator comes to your home and you are not present, a callback card will be left on your premises. Please call back the number on the card to arrange your census interview. And remember, we all count. Let's do our part to ensure a brighter, more secure, and sustainable future for all. This has been a message by the Central Statistical Office, Ministry of Finance, Economic Development, Physical Development, and Energy, Grenada.
To give the right amount, we need you on board. The entire public, your support, we really need it.
I took my best shot so that I can fit again.
I need a faith, I need a faith.
That's Tonga. Alright, that big more say moving on. Let's move now. I took my best shot to keep Grenada moving. Driver, let's move.
I took my best shot for my friends and family.
I took my best shot for myself and my country.
A message from the Ministry of Health. Grenada.
Count me, because we all count.
Count all of us. Nothing about us without us.
Count me.
Count me. We all count too.
Count me.
Count me. We all count too.
Count me. We are people too.
Count all of us. Nothing about us without us. Because we all count for the coming census.
To improve the life for the people, we need information.
Feel good facts. Avoid the most common causes of spreading the flu. Cover your coughs and sneezes with a tissue, dispose of it straight away, and either wash your hands or use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer.
I am Shauna Lambert Pitt, MD, Fellow of the American Academy of Emergency Medicine, frontline physician based out of Texas. I come from strong Grenadian roots, and my heart is here on the island. I've experienced waves of death during the last COVID pandemic, or the last surge. As I stood at home, I was disheartened by what was going on the island. There were low vaccine rates and people were dying. I come to you to urge you to take the vaccine. There is no treatment available, but the vaccine is a great hope. I know we're hesitant because of all of the myths that are out there. People think that the vaccine has been set up to kill, set up to put the virus in us, set up as a way to track, and all these other reasons. I'm here to tell you, I was one of the first people to take the vaccines at home. People coming in, going into the market and spending money is a way to lift our economy, okay? There were Black physicians involved in the development of this vaccine. There are lots of Black physicians who have taken the vaccine. It is not a way to get rid of our race. In the last surge with the Delta variant, I noticed that many of the patients
Pray be seated. Honorable members, session now resumes. And Senator Diali, you have the floor with the automatic 15 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good afternoon to all my colleagues. I too want to join in the sentiments expressed earlier to extend condolences to the family and members who would have died when we had a COVID spike, not only here but in the diaspora. We had more than 170 plus deaths in the diaspora, as I'm informed, plus over 200 here. So it has been significant for a small island like ours. But before I get into my substantive response to the revenues and expenditure for 2022, which, by the way, the private sector puts its support behind, and which I will explain as we go along, I want to take a few moments to speak to a few things that were said earlier on by some of my colleagues. And I know my new senatorial colleague here, Senator Phillip, had quite a lot of passion in his response when he spoke about TAMCC. And this House would have on record my love affair with TAMCC for 20 plus years in its various capacities. So I think it is important that I correct the record to some degree and to just let him know of a few things that did happen. When he spoke about TAMCC having outside campuses in the north and in Carriacou, he is correct. But that came at the insistence that at the time the board of TAMCC felt there was need to expand the campus and reduce that issue of students having to travel to Tantine for everything. And why? Because at the time, government was paying substantial amounts of money in transportation allowance to TAMCC to facilitate students who couldn't afford to get to the Tantine campus. So the obvious solution to that problem was to expand, to have a college at Sauters and one in Carriacou and offer courses. We even went as far as to set up digital networks so that we could teach from the campus in Tantine courses where lecturers couldn't facilitate themselves to go to Sauters and Carriacou. So that was all part of the TAMCC. So that is nothing new, my brother, Senator Phillip, when we talk about having campuses outside of the Tantine campus. I'm glad to hear that you know that there is now a committed approach by the government of Grenada through the Ministry of Education for TAMCC. And I want to say that, you know, there have always been this fallacy about TAMCC, that there is huge wastage at that campus, huge wastage. And the monies are spent carelessly and not accounted for. And let me just remind the members on the other side You know, it is government's mandate, Ministry of Education mandate, and I'm going to cite two areas. We had to deal with the issue of nurses, and we had to deal with the issue of increasing our intake of students in computer engineering and science, and I think my brother knows about those areas, and electrical. And the labs for those classes in TAMCC, Mr. President, could only facilitate a maximum of 20 students, and you have 100 applicants. And the government would have said to us at TAMCC at the time, you have to take all 100. Don't turn them away. What we had to do? Put on 5 classes, all into the evening. What does that require? Hiring of adjunct staff to deal with the volume of students. Hence, the salaries and payments for adjunct would significantly increase. And we'll have to keep going to government for increased subvention, which sometimes they did not increase. And then comes to the issue of how did we manage? You spoke about closer collaboration with the private sector. It has never been closer. We started a department in TAMCC specifically to elucidate support from the private sector, whether in kind or in cash. When the motor department wants a brand new engine, where did it come from? To give practicals to the students. When Flow would have contributed significantly to this college in terms of broadband support and otherwise. It has been a constant relationship with the private sector, even in curriculum development. So there has always been that in TAMCC. And there has always been this fallacy that we are inefficient and we wastage and we do a lot of wastage, but yet still we graduate hundreds of students with top class honors and perform top class when they go to universities in the US and elsewhere, which speaks to the quality of the education at TAMCC. The nurses program was given to TAMCC with no subvention from the Ministry of Health. I don't think you know that, or if you know, you didn't say that. Right. So I say that to say, Mr. President, that when we talk about TAMCC, we have to also talk about government's failure to provide the necessary financial support to the school when they were the ones who insisted that we expand programs and expand volume without no improvements in increasing class sizes and those type of things. I'm happy to hear now that we want to do that, and I'm in full support of that. And the last thing I want to talk about is the increases for the teachers. I am happy to hear that it's being addressed and it's being paid, because it was always the government who fell short on that issue, not TAMCC. We were the ones who said to government, this is what is happening with the other teachers. Because normally the issue was, when teachers in the public service get increases, we follow suit in TAMCC. That is how it was done in the past. And we'll give the same increases. When we wanted to implement, government told us, hold. And we held, and we held, and it built up. It was never a GOT problem. I know you needed a little historical lesson, so I'm happy to provide. And I know with your passion, you're going to do what needs to be done and get it to grow better. I want to make a quick comment on oil and gas. And I know it was said here that there's a lot of backward and forward about what the Prime Minister said about oil and gas, and it is not a sector now that is viable for investment because of what is happening in the world, what is going on in COP26, and all that's going on in the environment and CO2 emissions and so on. But I want to say one thing. I agree with the fact that oil exploration and development is not a prudent investment at this time. That is clear. And all the companies, if you watch what's happening in Ghana at BP International, where they're going, you have to have extensive reserves and reserves that are commercially viable for exploitation to make sense. And that is fine. And no set of investments is going to come from the World Bank and the IMF now to support it. But what we must pursue is gas. We cannot give up the production of gas. And I say it for one reason, Mr. President. If we were to transfer that 5 megawatt engine at Grenlec into natural gas burning instead of diesel, we will have a significant reduction in the rate once we could recover the expense to transform the engine. It is not cheap to transform the engine from diesel burning to facilitate natural gas. But that is what Trinidad have been doing for years. And that is why their rate is so low per kilowatt hour. And we have to pursue that. If we pursue nothing else, we have to find a way to get gas into Grenada, whether via pipeline or whether via ship. Now we could store, either from Guyana or from Trinidad, because Trinidad is now trying to develop with Guyana. Trinidad no longer could do the line. They have to beg Guyana now to help them do the line, because they're broke in parlance, local parlance. But we have to find a way to form partnerships that could find exploitation of the gas that is there, or get it to this country via pipeline or via ship. So I just want to leave the Senate with that. Quickly talk about my senatorial doctor on my side. And I know she chided me a little about public health education, and I totally agree. It is continuous. It is forever. We will always learn and continue to develop ourselves as we live. My only point is that I think there comes a time, especially in this COVID crisis, where I don't know what else we could do in terms of education. And I know my brother in labor spoke about how we have in the private sector tried our best to cajole and to talk and to talk. But I believe there comes a time when the line has to be drawn for us in the private sector. And the reason I say that is because we also have to balance protection of our environment and providing a safe environment for work with anything that faces or comes to our environment. And there is just so far, it's like consultation. You could only consult so much. There's a time when you must stop, make decisions and move along. And I think the same thing happens in public health education, of that to some degree. There will always be a change. There will always be something that we need to keep educating, whether it's nutrition, how we act, what we do, and all of that. And I agree with that. I have no issues with that. But when it comes for us to make decisions to move the process along, then sometimes we have to draw a line in the sand and say, this is where we know are going to go with the decisions that face us. So I mentioned just a few of those things. I'm going to come to the issue of unemployment. I think that's an area that we have to spend a little time on. So, Mr. President, I get to my substantive response. And you know, Mr. President, every time I come to this House to debate the budget in the last few years, I have been very impressed with the work that is being done by the Budget Committee and Ministry of Finance, and I continue to say and extend my congratulations. But you know, Mr. President, doing a budget debate now is not like it was when we started in the Senate 10, 12 years ago, where you got one big book of revenue and expenditure and you had to go through the votes and go through the initial readings. Now I have 5, 6 documents to read. I have one on debt. I have one on fiscal risk. And because of the suspension of the conditions under the RFL, the targets, I now have a one to read on the recovery plan. And then I still have the medium-term strategic paper to deal with. And to me, in handling this budget, you must be aware of the information in all the documents, because it influences the direction in which the government plans its budget and what it does and how it's analyzing where it is at and what needs to be done. And I see writings in the papers and other places of deeper analysis. I heard my brother mention this morning about poverty assessment, and deeper analysis needs to be done so that we could direct the resources properly. And that may be a fair comment, but I think, and based on what I've read, quite an amount of analysis have been done to understand the environment within which this budget has to be presented. And remember, you know, Mr. President, it is a budget. The word budget means your best estimation of what you think can happen, your best understanding of what revenues you may get. It is not a certainty. It is the best estimation of what you think. And when we talk about allocation, as we have said, and I've heard the conversation, We may allocate, but we may never get the money to fully exploit what we allocate for. And that is a reality we have to always keep in the back of our minds. So, Mr. President, the theme towards Vision 2035, protecting lives, safeguarding livelihoods, and investing for growth and perspective, I think is so adequate. First of all, towards Vision 2035 shows that we are working towards a plan, a strategic plan, 15 years developed. All parties were part of that. So all of us will have an understanding of what is in the plan and what is to be achieved. All of us would have had our say. All of us understand where we are. We don't want to get to a place where, you know, party change, and we say in education we want to achieve a certain thing, and then the new party come and cancels all the project as what's happening in St. Lucia now, and throws us back 10, 15 years and waste our money. We must all believe that if we go in with a particular plan in education, no matter who is in government, this is where we go in. This is what is best for the country, and this is how we have strategically planned, something that governments never did properly. We now have it in a 2035 plan, something that must be lauded and congratulated that the government is still planning to follow that. Protecting lives, without a doubt, safeguarding livelihoods, the balance between lives and livelihoods is something that came to us so prevalent in COVID. We never thought about it before. Public health, all that we know in public health, that's the first time we really understood from a public health point of view how important lives and livelihood needs to be looked at and educated about in order to get it right. And of course, investing for growth and resilience. We must do that. You know, Mr. President, in the last budget, I made a statement, and I'm going to repeat it, because I think it's still very apt. The only thing we can be certain about is uncertainty. And I want to repeat that. The only thing we can be certain about is uncertainty. And I think it encapsulates what we're going to happen in 2022. The mere fact that our government suspended the targets under the FRNL said to me that they still believe that we're heading into a very uncertain environment. And the suspension is expected to roll into 2023 as well. When you read the document on the recovery, it is explicitly stated there. My general observations from last year's presentation essentially remains the same. We're in a unique time with a very fluid environment. No government have all the answers, and no government knows for sure how we're going to move forward. It is an unusual time for a pandemic to be around us and what we do. We all shooting in the dark and hopefully learning from our mistakes as we move along and recovering from them as quickly as we can. Unfortunately for us in Grenada, we continue to have a low vaccination rate, which will undoubtedly keep us back from recovering as fast as we can as a nation and moving ahead to get to pre-pandemic levels. Suspension of the FRLL, I spoke about. The deficit budget, we have a deficit budget again. It's presented. Last year we had one. These were the first two budget deficits that we have been dealing with in the last 5, 7 presentations we have had. And we can understand, Mr. President, that it is not a Grenada thing. And I cite Trinidad and Tobago as a country that had more wealth and more oil wealth and so on. And they presented a deficit budget as well. Their instruments, financial instruments, were recently downgraded by the international community. It speaks to the challenges as countries and economies this pandemic is causing and how we mitigate and reduce the risk for us to come out of it and maintain some level of social comfort in our society. And I know my colleagues spoke about the mental challenges, ever so present and continues to be. We could see from the release of the curfew how our people are behaving. It is an example that they come out from like prison and the freedoms and the associated ways we behave. We pray because they are not observing the protocols, and we pray that when January hits, second week in January, and we start to test and we continue to test, we don't get the spike that none of us want. But we look at it and see how it goes. The link to the 2035 policy I spoke about, and that continues to be a very positive approach that we must continue to complement the government on. We have seen an improvement in the fiscal performance in 2021 compared to 2020, indication that some of our iterations that we have enacted are working. The government, again, must be complimented on that. I think the measures that they have taken, the measures that they continue to take, the way in which they are doing it is very commendable, Mr. President. And we must commend them. That is something we must do. Because nobody, as I said, had the answers. They won't get everything right. Certainly not. But in this difficult environment and in this difficult issue of dealing with a pandemic and all else, and you know, we talk about the debt, an increase in the debt load. And yes, we have to be careful of where we take the debt and what happens. But our debt load is expected to be about 69–70% of GDP. But why? The question is why? And the answer is simple. Our GDP have fallen, which is the denominator, so the ratio will go up. But our debt have also increased. Why? Because we have to continue to support the economic aspects that we must do. Pay salaries on time, pay social benefits on time, provide stimulus packages to help people who have been seriously impacted by the COVID crisis. How does government expect to do that if we shut down the economy? We must borrow. We must get help. We have to. And that is nothing rocket science. Where else would it come from? It must come from somewhere, Mr. President. So I am not really disturbed by we have increased debt, because I think it has to happen in order to facilitate what we're doing. And if you read the document on the debt and what is presented there, and the projections going forward, the projections is saying that we are going to, over the next 3 years, come down from the 60–70%, hopefully, if things continue along the trajectory that we want, and get back to going to the 55% target. I think it was mentioned yesterday by one of the senators on the other side, without the pandemic, we probably would have been there already at 55% of GDP. And that is probably correct, based on the trajectory that we had from the medium-term strategy paper that was presented in 2019. So, Mr. President, I am not overly concerned, because if we didn't take the debt, we probably would have a greater social uprising for people in the hotel sector who were out of jobs from all aspects, whether it's the plant and workers in the plant, whether it's the taxi drivers, the vendors, the entertainment industry, the restaurants. It was a whole-scale shutdown of that sector with thousands of people that needed some level of intervention and support. So I am of the view that our government did well to put 3 stimulus packages together and to have to borrow in some cases to do it. The cost of the borrowing to me is less than the social outfall that we'd have had if we didn't do it. And I think that is something that we need to talk about. From a private sector view, we commend the government for the handling of the economy in 2021, as it could have been worse, Mr. President. We have had, and we see, and I'll talk to later, small business relief. I just spoke about the stimulus packages. And, you know, we have seen the gradual opening back up of the economy, which is livelihoods, which represent livelihoods, tourism, education services, and most importantly, assistance to GDP for small business and micro business. And I will talk to that a little later. Generally, Mr. President, in my view, the budget looks to increase the disposable income of the average person in the streets and to help reduce unemployment. That is how we see it. That is how we see it. Some may say this is an election budget. Some call it tokenism. Some may say deeper analysis is required to better understand social needs, and we spoke about the poverty situation in the country. I want to speak about some of the positives. I believe when we speak about PSIP implementation of 80%, that is a huge positive. Why? Because I have stood on my feet in this chamber in previous budgets and said 45%. And that's fine, that's on the politics side. But what I'm sure about, the people who are working on those projects in those communities have a little more money in their hand to spend, and will spend it. And we in the private sector will benefit because they will spend it with us. A lot of us shop online, I know that, but I know that a lot of the ordinary folk will buy in the liquor shops, as my senatorial comrade in Labour said, and we'll spend the money here. We'll spend the money here. So that is important for us at an 80% implementation rate. The budget have identified agriculture, construction, tourism, and CBI, in my view, for sustainable growth going forward. And we have this conversation now, Mr. President, talking about productive sectors versus other sectors. And yes, that has been there for as long as I know myself, listening to budgets and sitting here. What is the balance to invest in productive versus, say, construction? But what we never see is what is the linkage between a short-term sector's construction and how it can influence the development of the productive sectors like agriculture. We never make that link. And I think that is part of the discourse that we leave out. And I think my senatorial minister, Senator Cox, tried to establish the link this morning in his presentation, that when we engage in projects in the construction sector, which, by the way, every country I know will do, go for construction in the short term to decrease unemployment, increase money and spend in the economy through people working in the sector, and for companies buying stuff from companies in the local economy that will promote economic activity in those companies and see some profits coming. So construction has always been cited, always, always. In the crisis that was spoken about that we had after Ivan, 2008, and so on, construction was the target, always a sector targeted to give short-term relief immediately. We take loans, we spend, we build up, but we still need to understand how it can help the productive sectors. We talk about tourism. You know, Mr. President.
Stop your trend of thought, but the fact of the matter is the transformation, no, you can stand, the transformation of China, the revitalization of Europe after World War II, construction. The challenges when they had the Great Depression and the designs to pull the American economy out of the Great Depression was construction.
And it is the same thing now.
So I myself don't understand the either or argument. I understand the augmentation argument, because you need one to pull the other. And construction is a perpetual undertaking. I mean, we're no longer building a parliament, but we're now building something else. Just thought I would just add that. I would just add my 2 pence to what you said.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Good.
And I would just add that the great United States, with all its printing of money and all, they're now looking to construction now, trillions of dollars, to generate economic activity, to build them back and get their GDPs back up to where they need to get it. You understand? So it ain't rocket science. All of us that do economics know that this is the way to go. But the link to tourism, The link to agriculture is what is important. If we don't have good roads, if we don't have good sites for tourists to come to, and if we don't have proper hotels, proper infrastructure development in terms of communication and so on, we wouldn't have a sector in tourism where people want to come. If we don't have a good cruise ship terminal for them to land safely and be protected, we wouldn't have a tourism product that we could boast about. Similarly for agriculture. We talk about feeder roads, right? And Mr. President, that has to me has always been, you know, I think Prime Minister in the other place was accused of being, you know, Dr. Stone, they used to call him at one time. Okay, he was always in concrete and building roads and drainage and so on. But we have seen the benefits of that today. We probably have floods, we probably have slippage, but it probably could have been 10 times worse if we didn't have the level of drains and some of the roads that we have today. And we never think about that. But again, that is where infrastructure helps. So, Mr. President, I move on and I go to talk a little about the upside and downside risks that we face, because this budget is based on a certain amount of assumptions for us to achieve what we have to achieve, what we say we want to achieve for 2022 in both revenues and expenditure. On the macroeconomic side, we have some red risks, which we call upside risks, and that speaks to contraction of the global economy, the pandemic, longer-lasting COVID pandemic shock, the geopolitical uncertainties that we see happening in Europe, and what is happening there with arms race and so on, how that can affect, first of all, investment flows to us, and of course, economic development in these countries, because you know that transmission, what we call it, money's coming back home from people working there. Remittances is important. On budget implementation, we have a couple red risk areas, which is on the upside. Lower than expected inflows, external and grants. That is a great possibility based on what happens out there. If we don't get some of these economies, if the European economies don't settle with COVID and what's happening, we may not get the grants through GCF and other things that my ministerial comrade went to COP26 and negotiated hard for us to get, and get to that. Capacity constraints affecting implementation, another issue that Senator Cox will face with, which he have been doing a great work with. I'm told, as of today's date, we're probably closer to 90% implementation. And you don't want to beat the drum, or beat it firm, because I think it's a great thing to get to that as a small country from where we were. And I cannot say more than to say, continue doing what you're doing. Climate, and I'm going to get to that. I think that, you know, Mr. President, is the greatest threat we face. Last year I spoke about labor as being the greatest risk. This year, it is not labor. Government have done what it has, have promised the 4% in January, have promised to regularize a lot of stuff, have given certain support in terms of a 13th salary and so on. The greatest threat we face, the 2022 and onwards, is climate-related issues, I think. And it is not waiting for 2022, it is happening as of yesterday. I think the leader of government business mentioned the issues as having with erosion of our beaches as a result of sea level rises. What is going to happen to the carnage? What is happening with bleaching, acidification of our oceans? What is it doing to fisheries? What is it doing to MPA? And what's happening in the MPA? You know, Mr. President, I was reading an article recently that spoke to the parrotfish. I don't know if you know the parrotfish. You must know the parrotfish. You're from the Carnage and Green Street. Santo Domingo have a big drive now on for the protection of the parrotfish. Why? Two reasons. Reef and generation of sand. The parrotfish, as we know it now, takes away all of the fungus that grows on the reef, the algae, and in doing that, when they digest and so on, they eat a little bit of the rock, they excrete sand. You get rid of the parrotfish by overfishing or not understanding its use, and we're in trouble. I say this as an example that the education that goes along with climate change, I think, is so important and critical And as I say, it's not a today thing, it's a yesterday thing, so we're in trouble. The financial sector, as was listed in the upside and downside risk, remains strong. The risks there are marginal. We're still very liquid in that sector. And, you know, the thing that we have to always keep on is the non-productive loans and understand how that can create issues with our financial sector. But in all of this crisis, and all of the help that was given through moratoriums and renegotiating of mortgages and loans, the financial sector have remained relatively strong. Kudos to that sector. There's a lot more to be done. GDP shocks and how it relates to our debt to GDP. And they have some analysis and projections in the document that speak to the risks and where we can go if we don't achieve what we do. And again, it's something we have to look at. Positive side, CBI. The demand under CBI outstrips the supply. And that has been as a consequence of COVID. And that is something we have to find a way to maximize. I have some thoughts which I'm going to talk about a little later. But it is one of the areas that you have to compliment the government on. As was said earlier, CBI was something that was frowned on, quite frankly, when it was introduced. There was all kinds of things that were said at CBI and how it's bad. And I know Senator Cadet will support me when I say certain things about CBI, but CBI is proving now, Mr. President, to be one of the alternative income streams we have that is crucial for us to maximize. When you watch at what Dominica is doing at CBI, Dominica is now going into hydroelectric potential based on their topography and their volcanic issues. And CBI funding is a major part of that. I think they're in discussions with Switzerland or one of those countries there to develop a partnership. But without CBI funding, they could probably never get there. Because that is an expensive way to generate electricity. The initial capital outlay is huge, but the downstream gains over time is great in terms of cost. Fiscal revenues, and I'm going to quickly go through this. Projected GDP growth of 4.5% for 2022 and averaging around 4.3% for 23 and 24. We certainly did not achieve our initial projection of 6% and expect it to be at around 4.8% as we end this year. Implementation and COVID wave, of course, in August and September would have seriously impacted where we are, and of course the revenues, as expected, did not materialize. And I want to quickly talk about, my friend this morning spoke about income tax being better than corporate taxes and other taxes. Obviously, that is a good thing for labor. If income tax is registering more income, it means people are being better paid, or at least in the tax bracket where they have to pay. Compare that to corporate tax. When you watch at what happened to companies' revenue lines and their profit line in 2020, and what continued recovery slow in 2021, obviously, corporation taxes would be down, stamp tax would be down. All of those traditional VATs would be down because transactions were less. VAT has recovered somewhat in 2021 because the opening up of the economy and creating more monies and putting more monies in people's hands will help transactions with VAT. But, Mr. President, we cannot leave this subject as a private sector person and not talk about the windfall government have gotten through CIF. CIF, as you know, is cost insurance and freight. If a freight for a container coming out of China used to cost me $3,000 US and is now costing me $12,000 US, and you add that to the cost and insurance, my CIF have now climbed significantly. The calculation of my CET and my VAT is based on a higher CIF. It is a windfall for the government. We can't deny that. And you can see that in the figures that were generated. We have made an approach to government on that issue and have asked for a recalculation of that CIF with the increased rate that we're seeing. And we don't expect this to end in 2022. When you read all the international releases on why freight have gone up, it is because there is a shortage in workers at the docks and truckage in those countries like the US, and from China, a shortage of containers themselves to put goods in, to ship to these countries, and the demand and supply posed by COVID have put an unusual blip, to put it this way, in terms of how demand is outstripping supply. So a higher demand for goods, the supply is not as quick as we ought to, so the prices go up. And that is what we're facing and expected to face well into 2024, until we regularize, hopefully, without COVID, creating the same shortages that we see now happening in Europe, with Omicron, happening in some other countries like Africa, where source material, special precious metals and other things for computer development technology comes from. And we have to pay attention to how these things are going to unravel in 23, 22, 24. So this world has become so much more dependent on each other for things that it is amazing. And our inflation that we talk about, Senator spoke about it this morning, it's 90% or more imported, because we are net importing countries, from energy to food to everything. And I hear they talk about having some sectors that could help with that, but we import. We don't want to eat what we grow. Let's put it that way. That is simply it. I don't know if I can say it any other way. And we import from yam to tomato to lettuce, even though we're growing it. We do it. And don't talk about the other stuff like cereals and so on and so forth. And the reality of it, we have been properly conditioned to eat those things. We don't eat roast corn and cornmeal and make cornmeal dumpling and grated corn and so on. We don't do that. You understand? We have been properly conditioned. And that is why we are net importing countries that government can't do nothing about in terms of the imported inflation. Nothing. Yes, we could do some work in poultry. Yes, we could do some work in fishing, but we can't. Mr. President, I know last year going to Abato. I know Amanda is going to in a market and so on. A pound of pork is $9 for a pound of pork. Sometimes 10 and 12, right? And 9 is a special price. Yes, 10 and 12. Why? Because the feed is so expensive to mine pigs. And we have not done anything from a local standpoint. I keep saying Caribbean agro is a place we have to look at carefully. I'm not saying the feed not have increased, but when you hear farmers talk about feed coming out of Trinidad and other places for chicken rearing and so on, it is so much cheaper than what is afforded to us in Caribbean agro. Yes, and it is something that we have to constantly look at. But I remember growing up as a young boy, if you want to buy beef, you have to buy pork. It's not so now, eh? If you want to buy pork, you might have to buy beef. You understand? It's quite a different thing, and the change in diet. But I say all of that to say, Mr. President, that we have to continue to look at what we're doing. And on the fiscal side, I think the proposal that government has made in terms, when you look at the expenditure, we're moving from 1.2 billion in 2021 to a proposed 1.3, 9.7% increase. On the revenue side, we're going from 653 million in 21 to 722. More or less increases. Expenditure 661.7 to 629.6. Capital of 305.6 in 21. We plan to spend 333.8 in 2022. Of course, and when you go into detail on the fiscal summary, a lot of this is going to be coming from the tax types that we're trying to, taxes on income and profits is basically down 2020 to 2021. Taxes on property, all the tax types are down, Mr. President, so nothing new here. That is the expectations as we go forward. So, Mr. President, move on quickly. For our private sector, can I say we were disappointed that we didn't see more fiscal measures taken in this budget? Yes, we were. Normally, our private sector will get rate reductions on corp tax, some relief on stamp tax, areas that we would have spoken about. We would have asked for other fiscal areas. We did ask about the CET calculation and duties that I said earlier. And we did present a paper. Of course, we didn't get there. So, of course, we have some disappointment. But the other side of the coin, to be fair, if government needs to maintain its revenue and its revenue structure with taxes, they probably couldn't give a relief this time. Why? Every time government drops off on the tax rate, there's a thing called revenue neutrality, concept of revenue neutrality, which speaks to, if I give up 2 million here, how can I compensate somewhere else to ensure that the revenue stays at the same level? And that is something they must do to be fiscally responsible, or else programs will suffer, whether it be social programs or otherwise. So we understand that. We welcome the fact, however, that there were no new taxes and increases. And that gives us an opportunity to speak to the fact that we, in our planning, could be predictable. So we can understand that the rate for corp tax and personal income tax is 28%. It would not change for 2022. So when we budget and we do our fiscal budgeting and our cash flows, we know that it's 28% and it would not change. So that helps. It does help. We do believe that, as I said earlier, the principle that this budget is based on, from where we sit, of putting more disposable income in the hands of the average man to spend and in the hands of our company, who would they buy goods from, is going to help us indirectly. Our revenues will go up, our stamp tax will increase, our VAT will increase, and at the end of it, our corp taxes will probably go up. And so government is expected to see some increases in their taxation revenues as they are budgeted, based on the concept and the principle of getting these things done and the spend increasing. Mr. President, as stated earlier, I want to spend a little time on the GDB initiative. Because I've heard a lot said about the GDB initiative. I've heard a lot of discussions in this chamber about what is happening there and what is not happening there. And I think our brother in agriculture spoke to some of it. But we welcome the GDB initiative. Why, Mr. President? Because it attacks the rural economy. It is fashioned for the rural economy. It is, I don't know where you could go in any institution and get 1% interest with a 3-year moratorium to start paying. And the most they may ask you to do is pay interest, no principal for the 3 years. That is absolutely great for these small businesses. You know what it does otherwise too, Mr. President? Some of these small businesses, which should have had facilities in the traditional financial institutions where they couldn't meet their payments, and the banks were calling on them and saying, listen, you are in problems, how could you do what you could do? You can't do nothing. These small businesses now have an opportunity through that facility in GDB to refinance their operation, get it going, and not have to pay back any serious thing for 3 years. That gives them a window of opportunity to go to the financial institution like the banks and say, listen, my cash flow is going to be X, Y, and Z over the next 3 years. I could afford to restructure under this. As my business gets back into going and performing, I can now change my operations with you. That is an excellent move. Excellent move for the financial institutions who traditionally would have held these small businesses and would have been in trouble now. This now gives them a window. I don't think we understood that. I also believe that GDB, and I heard that said this morning, has to do more in terms of changing the forms and making it simpler. Probably there's an argument to that, but I think Senator Cox addressed it. Our history in this country is that we believe these monies are free and we never want to pay back. We have had a lot of initiatives through GIDC for small loans, for fish boats, for fishing boats, for engines. They take the money, some of them may buy the engine, but they never pay back. Because the concept is, it says we money and it's free. You can't do that in this dispensation. we have to find a way to ensure that we pay back so that we can create more avenues for more who wants to come. So GDB have to put the necessary structures in place, ask hard questions where we need to ask them to ensure that people do the right thing. There's nothing wrong in that. I'm not saying that the process could not be simplified a little more. Far from that, probably. But we cannot remove some of the key things that will ensure that people meet their commitments. And that is something that we have to keep in mind. So we welcome the extra $10 million that the government is planning to put to GDP to help small and micro. Because you know, Mr. President, when we get small and micro in the rural economy to develop, unemployment automatically drops. Because we're employing 3, 4, 5 people that will have to pay a bus to go somewhere else. They could stay right in their community there and work and develop themselves. It's a welcome initiative. It's a welcome initiative. And I think it's something we need to praise and probably ask the government to do more if they can, because it's something that we have to keep on pushing. Mr. President, we also appreciate the fact of the increased activity through PSIP program. We spoke about the implementation rate. And I also want to say, you know, Mr. President, I have stood up here and always complained that sole sourcing as one of the things that the ministry does through the PSIP program, through local businesses, is something that somehow we need to find a way to encourage. When we get these donor funds or loans and so on, they put so much restrictions on us on using local businesses to get business that sometimes we don't. And we have to always make sure and go and beg and tell the ministries and the governments and the ministers, make sure local businesses are able to participate in whatever, whether it's through cement, lumber, steel, whatever it is, paint, I can't leave out paint. We must get something out of it. So if government is spending, as Minister Cox indicated, millions on refurbishing schools and building new schools, I cannot understand why our local businesses don't get a majority of that. Whether it's through furniture, Riversally we call it, Riversally furniture, right? That you talk about is Snell Hall. Why they can't get, why the Hubbards and the Hawkins and so on can't get the lumber and the cement and the steel and the Ramdanis and so on. Why? Even the electrical fittings, we have companies here that bring it in. We must continue to push that and preach that. The issue of unemployment, I want to quickly look at. Mr. President, how much time I have left? On my side, 20 minutes? Right. So quickly, on the unemployment front, I want to say something to this House, Mr. President. Let us assume 6 census open their facility next year, September, but it's not 100%, 80%, 90%. In St. David's, and I think we have another property in St. David's that's being done. But 6 census probably is the most advanced. Let us assume, and not assume, this is not assume, this is a fact. Most of the people who work in the hospitality sector move from St. David's to St. George's, St. David's to Grand Anse, and other places. Huge majority. If 6 census start, and they start to demand people in that area in St. David's to stay, what happens to the people coming to Grand Anse? You will have a serious deficit in workers for the plants in the St. Grand Anse area. That, to me, is a huge opportunity for our young people who have an interest in hospitality to jump on the bandwagon. We have about a year or more to go to get themselves ready. It means, my brother, the hospitality school in Tamsisi needs to expand and facilitate. If you have to use any of that $50,000 US for upgrade, I suggest you look at hospitality instantly. It means that the WISH that we put in on by Mr. Collymore as chairman of GTA, needs to come on, and that is free education. They are inviting students to apply, all of them on scholarship. They don't have to pay. And they're going to be trained by one of the most prestigious schools in the US. This is an opportunity for our young people. We talk about our young people who have opportunity. I don't know where else we could see but in hospitality right now, in a COVID environment. And we need to preach it from the mountain that this is available. And let us head there. We've been talking about all other things in ICT, and I heard mentioned this morning the school above the fire station in coding. Mr. President, we need to let our young people know these are the opportunities. No. That we need to maximize and take on. We don't need to wait, and we're creating the avenues for them. We need to get it done. Education services, the resumption of SGU and its continued expansion is something we continue to facilitate, and we continue to say how important that is to us in this country here. We welcome a number of the projects listed in the 2022 budget, but as we say, we hope that the spend will continue in the local private sector. I noticed the Minister of Finance was very careful to not list many, as I've done in previous budgets, because, you know, getting them going and happening is an issue. But in all of that, Mr. President, I want to touch the issue of vaccination. Could we really believe, as a country, and I know I'm looking at the doc, that we could get away without getting a higher rate of vaccination in our country? I don't care how we do it, whether it's through education, more education, or if we have to mandate. We need to get our population. We are what, 36, 37,000 now? We're not even at 40. Or a third wave, whatever wave. We need to get to 60,000. I don't understand for the life of me why our students are not mandated to be vaccinated. And we want to talk about face-to-face. We're joking. From 12 years to 17. Not understanding that. I don't know who convinced me otherwise. Our students, if we want to get back to some normalcy, and we talk all about the disadvantages of blended learning and all that doesn't come with it, engaging, not engaging, supervision, don't having supervision, we need to get them back to school face-to-face. It's only one way, Mr. President, there's only one way. We have to vaccinate our children. This is nothing new to us. For us to go to school in the first case, we had to show a vaccination card. That is nothing new. I don't know what makes this different. And this one on top of that protects lives. The earlier vaccination, yes, you could get smallpox and dead. Yes, you could get mumps and be crippled for life. But this is just as bad, or even worse. What is the resistance? And I am fully in support of mandating in that area. I know a lot of people will agree with me, and that's fine. But I think to get the numbers up, that is where we have to go. So I am in full support of vaccination. I heard the conversation this morning about SRNOs and private sector and all of that. We in the private sector continue to do as best as we can to educate and cajole and convince. You know, but sometimes when you ask people who are not vaccinated, what is the issue? They say they're uncomfortable. What is the discomfort? They can't tell. You know, so it makes it a little bit frustrating at times. But you still have to keep working with them, as docs say, and try and cajole and educate as much as possible. And we're trying. But some of us, yes, I was just about to say that, Mr. President. Some of us will follow the SGU model. Some of us will say you have to provide a PCR every 2 weeks. Some of us will go there because the risk for us going forward to the environment is going to be too much for us in the private sector, because I can be sued for providing an unsafe environment knowing that there's a solution to the problem. So it can be looked at as dereliction of our duties. The one thing I didn't even mention in the budget is what is happening with the Grenlec shares, and I'm hoping when my leader of government business responds, he could talk to that. What is the state where it is at? I did ask in the last budget we set aside some for our young people. I hope we get to that. I must talk about BICO and CLICO, Mr. President. I think the improvement and what was announced in the budget is positive. And I'm hoping we could monetize that bond quickly so people could get actual release. I always pain when I remember what happened to the cement and waterfront workers' pension arrangement. Guys have died, families have suffered from the cement and waterfront who have gotten zero from that issue because of the collapse of BICO CLICO. The fact that we have a bond now and we could monetize it, probably could use the ECHMB in the Eastern Caribbean Regional Securities Market and see how we could get it monetized. But it's something we must do, something we complement the government and the OECS governments from getting from Barbados. That is positive. Even though the cement and waterfront workers beneficiaries benefit, somebody going to benefit. But there are a lot of them still who are here sick and have no money and struggling. And I'm not a trade unionist, but I am certainly one who believes that those are things that we must get rectified. Mr. President, I want to go quickly to talk about CBI. And I cannot leave here unless I talk quickly about CBI. As I said earlier, I think it is one of the best programs we have. Grenada continues to be a gold standard in the CBI program. But we need to do a few things, I think. And one of them is we need to improve our marketing. 90% of Grenadians don't know that when we do bridges, roads, drains, or community centers, some of the funds come from the NTF to assist in the community projects. A lot of Grenadians don't know what happens when we pay debt. I think we have 330-something million we're paying in debt coming up in 2022. Funds come from the NTF through CBI to facilitate those payments and interest payments. And I heard about it spoken this morning about where the money is coming from to pay the interest, and some of it comes through the NTF program is in CBI. But very few people know of our program because the local marketing, regional and international, is extremely weak or non-existent. CBI needs to get that in order. We need to increase our efficiencies in CBI. I think we're doing about, I saw the figure, it was 400 in the last 6 months. If we extrapolate that, we're probably at 800 or 900 for the year, hopefully. We need to get up easily to 1,000 plus files a year. That is where our efficiency needs to get. The office is being digitized, if not completely digitized already, so there are facilitations for that, and we need to push it. But more importantly, we need to expand what we call the bond. You know, in credit union, they talk about the bond. The bond refers to what CBI could be involved in terms of projects. It has traditionally been in accommodation, to some degree in agriculture, to some degree in pharmaceuticals, but we need to expand that. Could we get CBI to finance medical? Thank you. Medical facilities. We need a cardiologist medical facility in Grenada. Could we work that through CBI? Could we work it through agri-processing? What is there to do that? IT development and software. We need to do that. And one of the ways we need to also do is amend the legislation. A draft was done in my time, and I know it is being considered to make CBI more like a statutory organization and not an arm of government. That will significantly help where we go with CBI. Tourism. The cruise tourism is positive. We need to continue to do that. We need to support the hotel plants that have suffered so badly and continue with their bubble. I spoke about the shortages in labor that is going to come, and the need to push our young people in that area in tourism. Agriculture, quickly. I know a lot has spoken about it already, and I know Senator Cox dealt with a lot of the areas I want to speak about, but I want to touch on two things in agriculture. To me, the greatest challenge agriculture faces is labor, Mr. President. Why? The debushing doesn't help. You pay $60 or $70 a day for 3 hours work. You ain't coming in agriculture and work from 7 in the morning till 2 or 3 and get the same $60 or $70 a day. So that doesn't help, but we need to change it. And I heard discussions about farm labor and how it is being structured to deal with that. But labor for us in agriculture, I say us because I'm in it, is one of the greatest challenges we face, and getting labor and people to work. One of the most positive things we have seen is the issue of nutmeg and the association with SGU to get the genetics right. We still planting 3 trees in a triangle to ensure and hope that we get a female in the tree. I just spent money to put on 200 nutmeg trees, and if I got 50 that was female, I was good. So look at the percentages, 25% or less, and our clerk is a major man in agriculture. He could tell you the challenges we face, and it took too long to get the genetics involved and getting it right. I don't even want to go and talk about the agro-processing part of nutmeg and what they should be doing. I know they're doing good work, and they need to continue. But one of the greatest issues we feel with agro-processing in this country, and we doesn't want to say it, when we talk about the failures, we doesn't want to drill along and say why. The real reason is 2. Raw material, consistent supply of raw materials and labor. Consistent. I ain't setting up no business to go in agro-processing, no matter what kind of capital I have. And I can't be assured of consistent supply of raw material. I'm not doing it. And if we can't get the production planning through agriculture and the other industries to comfortably supply me with soursop, for example, why should I go in? And I only get in soursop to last me for 3 months or 4 months or 6 months in a year in production. The same thing happened with barron and peppers. We have to get real, and we have to understand that businesses would not take the risk to go into agriculture unless they can mitigate those risks and get it better dealt with. I support the issue of spice farming. The pretty lasting issue I thought was discussed in detail. I don't need to go there. And only would say that the price of nutmegs we face on the international market now is so good that if we don't get there, we're making plenty joke. I want to end and do one more section, which is environment and climate. So, President, as I said, we are at a critical juncture in this issue. We talk about the blue economy, but the blue economy would not give us the returns if we don't manage the environmental impacts to the blue economy, which is sea level rises, bleaching, acidity, and we won't talk about the garbage. We can't talk about the garbage in the blue economy. And we then have to balance Guyana's challenge with extraction of fossil fuels from the blue economy, which is a relevant and way to exploit the blue economy, but I know how to balance that with the issues that are just come out of COP26 and increasing the CO2 emissions. They have huge jungles that they could sell and balance their jungle in terms of carbon removal and get some relief there, but some of us in these small islands don't. So that issue needs to be looked at carefully. Issue of financial institutions increasing their lending for environmental projects. I'm aware that certain financial institutions are looking at that. So they are now offering preferential rates. You come with a project, environmental project, that you want to do, you'll get a special interest rate and special consideration because it speaks to the environment and it speaks to what's happening in climate change. We have erratic rainfall. The biggest war we're going to have coming up just now is over fresh water. Senator Steele, I'm sure, would agree with me. We have to find a way to treasure our fresh water supply. The indiscriminate cutting of trees, the management of our forests are going to become more critical as we approach, and that temperature rise of 1.5 degrees we're trying to protect. If it's not protected with the situation with coal and how it's burned in China and India, we're in for some challenges. Natural disasters and the intensities, we know about that. We welcome electric vehicles. The grant funding, I think Senator Steele spoke to that. The issue with that is the paperwork. Now, WASA took almost 4 years to get the paperwork done after they got approval. And I think it's only this year they got the first tranche of money to start their work. Of course, COVID didn't help. But that is a situation we have to find a way to reduce. I know some financial institutions are looking to get themselves accredited by GCF and other places so they could shorten the time frame in these things. There's a new report on sargassum that speaks to it being seriously facilitated in growth because of raw sewage being dumped in the oceans and pesticide, something we have to look at here as it affects us. Sewage treatment is a big thing, and I also have projects on that. And I know my Minister on the Environment is going to talk to us about COP26 when we look at and deal with certain things. We certainly appreciate the St. John's River mitigation project. Disaster from Vulnerability Project, Grenada Climate Resilience, the EDA project with MPAs and mangroves, the Sotege Breakwater, Natural Disaster Rehabilitation, Guava Extreme Rainfall, water supply expansions, and sewage improvement. Mr. President, when I looked at that, 7 out of 15% of all the projects we have coming up in the next year or two is going to be related to the climate. That's a good thing. Government, commend yourself. That's a great thing because it is critical and we have a lot of money to spend. Clearly 50% of our projects coming up is going to be climate related directly or indirectly. And as I said, Mr. President, you have a lot of work to do concerning the carnage and all of those areas, which I know Senator Steele has on his list. Mr. President, I conclude. Election, tokenism budget, I don't know. I'm not a politician. What I do know is that this budget puts in the hands of the ordinary people increased disposable income that can be spent and help with the economic activity. And we have to look at that as being positive. We have various initiatives under the PSIP that with a 90+% implementation rate, we hope to see improve. Our social security programs are being preserved, which is critical, and we need to go to it. And we spoke about how it helps in the economy. I want to take this opportunity, Mr. President, to thank my private sector colleagues for again giving me the opportunity to serve, again in the Senate for another year. And most likely this might be my last budget presentation to this House, this honorable House. If our Prime Minister holds true to saying that you will call election before the due date, and it happens in 2022, more than likely, I will not be here presenting another budget. So I say thank you for the privileges, Mr. President, and all that you have done to guide me through my almost 15 years of being here. To my senatorial colleagues that have been working with us over the time, we have seen many changes, young, good, bright, positive people coming forward in this Senate, and it speaks well to where this Senate is going to go and what is going to happen. Cannot go without talking about my parliamentary staff, the clerk, his assistant, and all the back office people who have done such a great work to keep us. And you know, when we came here, Mr. President, we had all these big files. And I used to tell the clerk, you know, I hope the day will reach when we'll see this thing and everything comes electronic. I am happy to say that I'm going to leave this chamber and the people to come are going to inherit a system of pure electronic files. That cuts down so much on costs. The amount of money we start to spend to get drivers to drop papers to us and print and put together all the acts, some of them hundreds of pages. You know, everything is electronic. And Mr. President, that is progress, positive progress. Testimony to yourself and your friend in the other place who have done tremendous work to change the rules that we have in that little blue book. And hopefully it speaks to us going forward and where we progress. Finally, I believe the only way out of this pandemic is vaccination, Doc. I will say that over and over. I want to say special thanks, of course, to my family, my wife and my kids for keeping me here. Of course, and for giving me this health and strength to continue. And of course, I cannot leave out my God. You know, Mr. President, you and I will differ on that, but I must give spiritual thanks to my Creator. I think He's the one that gives us all that we do and we impart. And I cannot not say that. And of course, yes, and I want to wish Merry Christmas to those of us who celebrate. Great holiday greetings and a productive year for 2022. We are going to have our challenges, but I'm absolutely certain we have the brain power, the commitment, and the tenacity to deal with the problems that we face, as we have done, and I'm certain we'll continue to do. And my compliments to my colleague senators on the government side. You guys, through the government, have been doing an exemplary work in these challenging times. Continue. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Diali. And I want to bid each senator, members of staff, police officers, a safe journey home. We resume tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Honorable members, this Senate now stands adjourned until tomorrow morning at 9.